his view, committed to the values of, like I said, serious Reform Judaism, serious conservative Judaism. There were only 4 trustees in the beginning. His wife was not among them. He didn't want that messiness, and he built this board and only had 1 vote. It was all his money. He didn't want to be the deciding. Right? He said we have to reach a consensus, and he never once said it's my money. But he fashioned this foundation in the model of his business. Everything had to be researched. Everything had to be data-driven. Everything had to be evaluated and improved. His view was, if this organization were a company, would you buy stock in it? That's how he measured philanthropic investment. Every trustee was assigned a project and had to know it inside out and present it to the others at board meetings. It wasn't a staff where they just agree, and have checks signed. Visiting programs, being present, being a thought partner. That was what he thought, the value that he brought. And because his experience initially was through synagogue outreach, that was the initial investment. 1984, basically till 1992. So synagogue outreach. And he started to read about religious change. He started to read about Baptists, and really wanted to learn, how do people undergo religious change? What's the role of the organizations, the churches, the synagogues? How do you enhance it? One of the first things he said was, there's no field called Jewish outreach. Everybody's doing their own thing. You need a field where people can share best practices and collect data. One of Avichai's earliest investments was, for those of you who might be familiar with the acronym, AJOP, the Association of Jewish Outreach Professionals. He started that. It was Avichai's idea, not to fund it in perpetuity, but to start it because the field, right, the tide will rise and all the boats will go with it. That's what he really believed. And it was a relatively small foundation. He was putting in money each year. In Israel, the focus was on the second bullet, to get the secular and religious to be together more. Those of you who might know Ruth Calderon, former MK, who started Project Elul, which was a Beit Midrash for secular and religious Israelis together. Right? Avichai funded that. Beit Marashah, which is supposed to be a Beit Midrash outside of Hebrew University, where to create rabbis for the next generation. Avichai ended up funding Tzohar, for those of you who know about this sort of parallel rabbinic organization, so you don't have to deal with the chief rabbinate for marriage and things like that. Avichai funded that. Now it's independent, but that was the goal. But in America, the focus was on synagogue outreach, because that's how Zalman became more committed and intentional about his Judaism. 1992, total scan of all our work. What have we realized in our investment? What has been our, I hate the term, but I'll use it, what's been the ROI, the return on investment, for all of our philanthropy? We're talking about tens of millions of dollars at the time, and yet the evidence showed very spotty. Synagogue outreach, you can get one person, maybe the rest of the family isn't that interested, then they move. It's really hard to build. He was very frustrated with this, so he said, okay, trustees are going to have several retreats, we're going to bring in outside consultants to help us think about this. What is the best way forward to achieve our goals? And in the early 90s, the initial evidence was coming out that day schools produced the most committed and engaged leaders of the Jewish community in North America. When you looked at federations, you saw Ramah alumni, right? So overnight camps is going to be important. But Schechters, right, were, according to him, as he looked at it, Rav Sock schools were really very small in the early 90s. I think there were 15, maybe something like that, a very small number, maybe 20. Orthodox schools, Schechters, and community day schools, and I think Pardes, which is the Reform had a few, and he said, let's see if we can help that community. And they used 1992 to 1994 to transition out of outreach and into day school supporting, with the intention of going into camping as well. How do you begin to attack schooling? First of all, expand the board. We're going to start doing more work. He had retired now, full-time, meaning his business was now running without him. He dedicated himself full-time to philanthropy, which made everybody uncomfortable because you could get a call at 2 in the morning. He says, I was reading what you wrote. That's how he was. That's how his business, that's how he ran his business. He could call you at any hour, and that's how he ran the philanthropy too. He was a very hands-on chairman of the board, but it was always to, how could this be better? And he says, like, I'm having this idea, and if you said, yes, that's right, don't tell me I'm right, tell me how I'm wrong. I need you to push back so I can sharpen our thinking and get a better result. So it was always collective, the thinking, but it was always show me how we can make a difference that will be lasting, but it has to be driven by research. So the first thing, they hired a new executive director, that's Yossi Berger, who I hope many of you have met because he's a wonderful person and really excellent at what he does. He went around to different schools to just do a survey, and he would ask, what do you need? What's lacking? What do you think the system needs more of? But the research from places like Harvard and other schools of education all said, what's the most important thing for school success? The leader. The leader. Teachers are second, but a good teacher is hamstrung by an ineffective leader, but a good leader can attract good teachers. So the very first investment was in leadership. He went to visit, those of you who might be familiar, Esther Krause, who started Maya Note, a girls' high school in Teaneck, New Jersey. And he's taking his notes and talking to her, and she's talking about the importance of curriculum and teacher support. And he says, and what's that behind you? It was this little certificate from Harvard, from the Harvard Principal Center. And he said, what's that? She says, the best professional development program I've ever been on. And they started to talk and said, do you think they would take Jewish day school leaders? And she said, ask. I can't speak for them. So the two programs that were the first out of the starting gate as Avichai transitioned into day schools was the Harvard Principals Program and a grant to the Davidson School to start DSLTI. They needed a year to hire a director and figure out a curriculum. So whereas Harvard, it was just paying for the tuition and hotel of, I think at the time it was just 10 people, not to go overboard. Let's get them to give us an evaluation. We're going to do surveys. We're going to do interviews with them. How was it? Did it help you? Did you find it meaningful, etc.? Is it right? Is it wrong? And surveys are the most important tool in Avichai's kit, because we use that to, the program officers come in and take all the responses and try to improve the programs each iteration. SSLTI, right, the very first, it was secondary school, because the research showed the most impact for religious identity was high school. So initially, all of our investment was in high school. Then a couple of people said, more students are likely to go to a Jewish high school if they went to a Jewish elementary school. But the thinking behind the elementary school investment was to get them to choose high school. We started a mechina program. High schools that didn't have a lot of feeders, we gave them money to start ramp programs of a year or two. Kids who want to transition, who ultimately want to go to a Jewish high school, but they didn't have the elementary school education. A 2-year separate program to get up to speed on Hebrew and other things, to get ready for high school. Not only Orthodox. Schechter High School's the Mechina program was actually quite popular. Other considerations were the curriculum of the day school. and the teachers. One of our early teacher investment programs was the Pardes Educators Program, which is a pre-service program. You get an MA in Jewish education, you get text learning from Pardes, and then you commit to 3 years of teaching in a North American Jewish day school. But how do you build a portfolio so that you're really hitting all the spots that are necessary? So please turn to the other side. This is a document written by the trustees articulating what is the aspiration for the product of Jewish day schools. You can look at the bullets, they're pretty straightforward, but I want to highlight really the first paragraph. And that is that the investment in day schools is targeted at the youth because, as opposed to synagogue outreach, you're getting them younger, you're getting them for longer, so retention has always been an issue that we try to help with, and you can immerse them in an environment where they'll learn a lot. But the argument is not that every American Jewish kid will go to a Jewish school, that what we call the energizing nucleus of the Jewish people, a vibrant North American Jewry, depends on an informed, literate, committed, Zionistic youth that goes into adulthood with those commitments. Okay? So if you look at the bullets, you could see study of texts and history and knowledge of Hebrew. So basically the first 4 bullets. So that we call literacy, which is the bottom L, like a Jewish literacy. Then feeling part of a people, the significance of the state of Israel, and feeling a responsibility to Jews around the world. Starting in 2001, we began investing in the former Soviet Union. Of course, after 2 years of figuring it, doing the research to how we're going to invest, and there we invested in day schools there as well, but we also invested in Jewish culture and the college crowd. That seemed to be a more important and manageable approach in the former Soviet Union. And if you look at the last 5 bullets, you'll see the idea of values and mitzvot, lifelong learning and spiritual growth, which is another way of saying you're reflective about your practice, the idea of transmission, and that's what we call our religious purposefulness. So the acronym that Marvin Schick actually coined, for those of you who are interested, he helped coin religious purposefulness. Religious purposefulness is the one that is most confusing to people, because nobody uses that word. But purposefulness meant that you're intentional, deliberate, thoughtful. You're not just doing what moves you at the moment, but it's a sense of learning, an educated, informed commitment, and that's what we try to capture in religious purposefulness. So LRP was deemed to be the focus of the North American philanthropic portfolio. Zalman passed away in 1999. He was 72. And he wanted the board to continue. There was now a large number of trustees. He appointed Arthur Freed to be the chairman of the board because they had worked very closely together when Zalman was alive. Mem Bernstein shortly thereafter joined the board as a regular voting member. But Zalman, as he knew he was sick, so he knew he was not going to live long, he insisted that the foundation be a sunsetting foundation. Why? If we want to have impact, he said, and all we do is use the interest, 4%, even if it's a lot of money, that ends up, if you want to have the impact, you're going to have to spend from the corpus. But more importantly, he was very nervous about mission drift. Mission drift is like, some trustees will retire, just move on. New ones will come on, and they'll have a different idea. And I want this foundation to do, right, what I came into Lincoln Square Synagogue to do, which was to memorialize my father, Avi Chai. He wanted his lifestyle and commitments to be spread through North